Our learning target is I can simplify radical expressions whose radicands contain perfect square factors. So what you need to know. Steps to simplify a radical. First, we want to make a factor tree. This means that the number that we're given, we break it down into two of any of the factors that contain that number. Second step, any numbers that have a friend come out of the big house. So what this means is any pair of factors that you find, that pair get to come out of what we're calling the big house, or like we used the jail analogy in class. They get to come out if they have a buddy, so they get to come out of the square root. And then any number that doesn't have a friend, so if you have a single factor that doesn't have a pair, doesn't have a buddy, then they have to stay inside the house or inside jail, depending on the analogy that you've heard. So we're going to do a couple of examples. In the first example, we have the square root of 24. So we want to, in that first step, factor that number. So we want to find two factors of 24. So what multiplies together to give me 24? And I chose 3 and 8. You might have chosen 2 and 12. You might have chosen 4 and 6. Any of those would work. The 3 is a prime number. I can't factor it any further. But the 8 can be factored. Its factors are 2 and 4. The 2 cannot be factored any further. It is a prime number. Its only factors are 1 in itself, but 4 can be broken down further into 2 and 2. So once you have your factor tree completed, you cannot factor any further. All of the ends of your branches are prime numbers. You're going to find pairs of the same number. So here I happen to have 2 pairs of 2's. I've highlighted them. You may want to circle them just to kind of help identify what you're going to be taking out. And then what I have left over, I've got in boxes here, and those are those prime numbers. They don't have a buddy. They're stuck inside the house. They're stuck inside jail. So that group of 2's, that pair of 2's that's in purple, that pair is going to come out front. And you can see that right here. So that 2 came out front. What's left over are the 3 and the 2. They're left inside of the square root. They didn't have any buddies, so no one could bail them out. They get stuck inside of jail. I have 3 and a 2 left. We're really multiplying those two together, so when I simplify that, my final answer is 2 times the square root of 6, because 3 times 2, what was left over, those factors, we multiplied together. Now in the second example, I now have the square root of 50 times x to the 5th. So there's a numeric part, the coefficient, and then I have a variable part. I'm going to go ahead and tackle that number part first, the coefficient. So we want to find factors of 50. I chose 5 and 10. You might have chosen 2 and 25. That's totally acceptable and fine. 5 can't be broken down. It's a prime number, but 10 can be broken down into 2 and 5. Once I've identified those, I look to see if I can break down any of those numbers any further. But 2 and 5 are both prime numbers, so we've finished factoring 50. Now I want to find my pairs of factors that are the same. That group of 5's there, they have 2, they're buddies, so that pair is going to be able to come out, and then I have a 2 left over. Now let's look at that variable part. I have x to the 5th. So what does that really look like? What's happening here? As you can see, I've written out x 5 times because x to the 5th is really x times x times x times x times x. And we're doing the same thing. Any pair of x's get to come out of prison because they are on the buddy system. Someone bailed them out. And then anybody that doesn't have a buddy is left inside. Another way of looking at it is dividing that exponent by 2. I get 2.5. So that 2 matches up with the 2 groups that I've taken out. I've got one group of x's and another group of x's. And the way that I like to remember it is we can take out 2 pairs of x's, and the one, that 0.5 guy, he stays inside. So when I go ahead and write my answer, I'm going to put everything together. So notice here I took my pair of 5's from my coefficient part that came out of the house, my two pairs of x's, so this was one pair and this was a second pair, so two pairs of x's turns into x squared, that came out front. And then what was left inside, I had that prime number of 2 that didn't have a buddy, he's stuck inside, and then that x term, it's by itself, that 0.5 guy stays inside. So my final answer is 5x squared times the square root of 2x. Okay, now would be a great time for you to pause, try these on your own, and then come back and check your work. In the first example, we want to simplify the radical. We have the square root of 56, and we're going to go ahead and break that down. So let's find some factors of 56. I chose 2 and 28 this time. 2 is a prime number, it can't be broken down anymore, but 28 can be broken down further into 2 and 14. So from there, the 2, I see that that's a prime, I can't go any further, but 14 can keep going into 2 and 7. 2 and 7 are both prime numbers, so we're finished. I have one pair of 2's, and then I have one 2 that's alone and one 7 that's alone. So the pair of 2's gets to come out front. That's that 2 out front. I'm left with the 2 times 7 on the inside, which simplifies back to 14. So my final answer for this one is 2 square root 14. In my second example here, I have the square root of 18 times x squared times y to the third. I'm going to go ahead and tackle that number part first by breaking it down. Break it down into 2 and 9. You could have used 3 and 6. It doesn't matter where you start, just pick one factor pair. 9 can be broken down into 3 and 3. That's a perfect square, so that pair of 3's that they're on that buddy system, they get to come out of the house, and that 2 is going to be left behind. Now looking at the variable parts, I've got x squared times y to the third. Remember, the rule is that we can divide the exponent by 2. Okay, so for my x part of this, I've got x squared, my exponent is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, which means I can bring out one pair of x's out front. My y's, I've got y to the third, so 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, so the 0.5 guy is going to stay inside. So my answer is going to look something like this. I had that prime number, oops, this guy is supposed to be a 3. Made a mistake there when I was copying. My pair of numbers here was actually a 3, not a 2. Okay, so we took that pair out. I took out one pair of x's and I took out one pair of y's. Okay, so that's where I'm getting those values out of the house, and then left over, oh, I clearly didn't remove the number part from my first example when I was copying and pasting. So the number part here, I just have the 2 left over, and I had that 0.5 guy that's all alone because it was an odd number. There's always going to be 1 left inside, so I'm going to have a 2 here instead. So if I write this a little bit neater, this is the same as 3xy times the square root of 2y. And that would be your final answer. If you need more information on this topic, you can always check out the Learning Target spreadsheet for additional resources, videos, and practice.